Hi, it's Johanna from The Last Stitch, and do you know what I love? I love top stitching, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, where I share my top tips for top stitching. And before we get started, I want to say a few words about the sewing machine. I would say that the quality of the top stitching and the quality of the sewing machine is quite correlated. So, if you have a good vintage sewing machine, you can usually expect to get nicer top stitching than with a newer budget version. Also, if the top stitching doesn't look quite as well as you had hoped, well, it could be a sign that it's time to service the machine, and that is actually the case for me here today, because my sewing machine needs to go to the repair shop, but I'm having sort of separation anxiety about that one. So let's talk about my first tip, which is picking the right thread. I have 3 different versions here, which the first one is buttonhole thread, and that's the thickest one, and I love it because it provides a very beautiful rustic looking stitch. My second choice is jeans thread, and jeans thread is a little bit thinner than the buttonhole thread, and you can find this pretty much anywhere, so it's very easy to find, and it usually have a pretty good range of colors. And my third choice is actually using 2 strands of thread in the upper spool. And the great thing about using this 2 strands method is that firstly it's usually cheaper than using this kind of thread, and secondly the selection of colors when it comes to this traditional top stitching thread isn't all that great sometimes, but here you can have a much bigger option, so that's what I'm going to show you today. For the bobbin thread, don't do the mistake that I did when I began top stitching and using this kind of thick thread in the bobbin. Instead, you'll just use regular sewing thread. And the great thing about that is that it runs smoothly through the bobbin, and also I will give you a bonus tip here. If you're top stitching, say, a pair of jeans and you're planning to use a dark color for the top stitching, I recommend using a navy color for the bobbin thread, because that will make sure that none of the bobbin thread will be visible from the outside. Of course, there might be occasions where you actually need to have a thicker thread in the bobbin, for example when the top stitching will be visible for both sides. What you can do then is to loosen the bobbin tension by adjusting the screw on the bobbin. Do be aware that doing this could mess up the tension afterwards, so you have to mark where the screw was placed before you start adjusting it. Tip number 3, use a blind hem presser foot. Why, you may ask? Well, the great thing about this one, it has a little blade here, and that you can use as a guide, either aligning the blade along the edge, or you can align the blade in the seam, so you have the blade in the ditch and then you sew a parallel stitch. Also, if you have a machine like I do, where I can actually change the settings of the needle, you can also make a wider or a more narrow seam just using this one. And if you are top stitching a very wide hem, for instance, I also recommend you can use this, which is the sewing machine ruler, and you just place it in the presser foot. Tip number 4, using a top stitch needle. Now, you don't really need to use that all the time, because on delicate fabrics with thin threads that's not an issue. But if you are, for instance, making jeans, you might considering investing in this one. And why, you might ask? Well, this one has an extra large hole, so it's very easy to get even the thicker thread into it. And this particular brand that I have in my hand now is from Schmetz, and I highly recommend it because it's very, very sturdy. It can sew through very thick material, and it's a good investment that will last you a very long time. So that's my tips, and now I will show you how we will do this. So let's get started. So before we get started, just a few words about setting up your machine. As you can see, we have 2 strands of thread in the upper spool. I have set my machine on a bit of a longer stitch. On my machine I have 4 right now, but you can find your own preference. I have attached a blind hem foot. I have a single navy thread in the bobbin. And I have also set my sewing machine needle placement far to the... Oh, I can't make the difference between right and left, sorry. One side, let's just say that. We place the fabric, align it at the blade of the blind hem foot, and then we just start sewing. So that was all my tips for top stitching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more, please hit subscribe and also check out all my other sewing tutorials. I also have a blog called thelaststitch.com where I share many more sewing tutorials and also talk about a lot of other sewing related stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time, and stitch safe. Bye bye!